Welcome back, Beastcoast subs and fans everywhere. It is just James and I for this episode, but we've got a lot to cover, so we are excited that you're going to join us to go over the North America International Championship recap. James, how are you after that weekend?
I mean, I'm feeling great. I didn't have to play Pokemon. I wasn't actually at the event. Unfortunately, we don't have Wolfe, who was the only one who was competing there, and Aaron was not there either. So it's just you here today that was at the event. So how was New Orleans? The first time we had New Orleans for the North American International Championship.
Honestly, it was really fun. I think it was a great location for doing things after the event. There was so much good food, which is why I wasn't sure if you were going to go even just to support friends and eat food, because I feel like you would have had a great time either way. But no, it was a good location. I'm excited that we're going back there for next year.
I cannot wait. Unfortunately, I had a bit of an obligation this year, so I was not able to attend. Very unfortunate, but I am looking forward to competing next year at New Orleans. Hopefully nothing else goes up there. And yeah, very excited for the food. I heard my friends had a huge time. A lot of party people apparently. There were two sides. There were either the people who really didn't like it and the people who loved it. And I felt like most of the people I saw loved it. So very looking forward to my time there.
Well, you didn't have to play, James, because you also locked in a tier 1 invite. Congrats.
Thank you. Luckily, I was actually during my trip while I was not in North America. Yep, I was nervous because for the viewers at home, I was currently in the race. I was the fourth going into the event, fourth in the North American leaderboard and top 12 of the championship points after NIC. Do get a travel award and a round 1 bye to the Hawaii Honolulu World Championship. So the race was very tight, and I mean very tight. I was very scared that I was actually going to get surpassed because the between like 4th to like actually even from 3rd to like 13th was actually like pretty scarce, where good performances from like that range of brackets could have really changed things up. And there were definitely a few players who, if they had won the event, could have just surpassed me. So definitely was sweating a bit at home, but was a relief to actually secure the event without having to actually play.
I'm so happy for you, and of course super happy for Aaron, who locked up his invite a couple of events ago, and then Wolfe got so close to getting a travel award after only competing at a couple of events this season, which I think is honestly incredible, just given how close that race really was, as you were talking about.
Yeah, it's super impressive because he's only competed at what? It was Pittsburgh, 2 other regionals
Orlando
that he won.
And Knoxville, right? Oh no, Orlando and Charlotte.
Yeah, Orlando, Charlotte, and then 2 internationals. So no locals, and he was still really close, almost even to the stipend. Even he was, I think, 18th, I believe, at the end. We actually don't know the true results unless like there were some maybe mess ups with local CPs, but I think everything towards then at the point of when we're recording this is updated, besides if they have to change anything or fix it. So yeah, it was actually really impressive that he was able to accomplish that much in that time, but so close. He was the one I was sweating for, because if he did win the event, he did surpass me championship points. So but he still had a pretty good performance. Day 1 he went 8-1, and he, I believe, finished top 32, I believe, with an 11-4 record.
Yeah.
We'll get into that, I guess, when we go into the standings.
Well, why don't we? What a great segue, James. I guess we'll dive into the standings from the North American International Championships. The event was 15 rounds of Swiss, which is kind of wild to think about, because you had the 9 days on day 1, and then you played 6 on day 2, and then you had to play top 8 and top 4. Which is just a lot of Pokemon. For people that haven't had to experience a 15-round Swiss day or like tournament, that's a lot. And I think ICs are where you really up the skill level of all the opponents that you're playing too. So it felt like every round was really hard from the people that I was talking to.
Yeah, this event, of course, every 15-round event is very, very competitive in a way. Now, from regionals, we used to have back only a couple of years ago, they used to be like 9 rounds really of Swiss, and then it would be like a top cut. Now we have regionals as the standard, probably going into day 2 Swiss in most occasions. being 14 rounds of Swiss, and then these really, really big events like the European International Championship and the North American one being 15 rounds. And that one extra round can be a huge matter in the amount of stamina that can be provided, not only affecting who actually makes it into the top cut, which is a top 8, but also like it could affect your placements in that top 8 and top 4 matches, which are very crucial because the amount of prizing that was on the line is pretty substantial.
It's a lot of money, like especially with how prize payouts worked out for the 2024 season. They got doubled, and they also increased the number of players that are actually getting money. So it felt like every match in rounds 13, 14, and 15 felt like multiple $1,000 money matches to actually get the prizing. So very stressful for sure. We do have 32 players that solidified the top 32. And it was really interesting to see the level of diversity and compositions as we entered into this event. Right previous to this, we had the Bologna special event, which was the final European event in Europe. Duh, that makes sense. I just said that. But we ended up having a Shadow Rider Calyrex win in our final NA event. So kind of what were you expecting that people would bring into the event this weekend?
During the last couple of weeks leading up to NAIC, I would say before those couple of weeks, I think Shadow Rider Calyrex was very disrespected, and we've talked about that several times already. But I think after the Los Angeles Regional Championship, where it was able to get first and the top 4, and then it won the Italian special event, I think people kind of realized you really have to respect this Pokemon, because I think the problem was a lot of players did try at the beginning to run a Focus Sash set and just rely on just standard Nasty Plot. But the thing is, Calyrex Shadow Rider actually has a pretty good amount of bulk. And with Terra, especially getting rid of that 4 times weakness to Ghost and Dark type moves, the ability to actually make it bulky is pretty easy. So being able to accompany it with like a different items such as the Spell Tag, which ended up winning the Los Angeles Regional Championship, bulky items such as Citrus Berry. Overall, like you can play a bit more differently with the Calyrex Shadow Rider. It's able to stay around on the field much longer. Draining Kiss became a new tech with Terra Fairy that was just able to recover so much HP, because Draining Kiss, although a weak fairy type move, you get 75% of the recovery. So it is a pretty dang powerful coverage with Ghost and Fairy, as we've seen in Fluttermane in the past. So I think a lot of players were respecting the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Miraidon still being respectful, because we have seen it still perform really strong, especially after the first regional championship we had in this format. Terapagos ended up making a pretty big statement, especially at the event in Italy, because it did end up placing quite high, with one player even going almost undefeated throughout the tournament and went undefeated in Swiss, I believe, and the other one making top 4. So pretty strong records overall for Terapagos.
Yeah, I think that was both of the restricteds that everybody was looking at. Like if you aren't running Calyrex Shadow Rider for NAIC, then you're thinking about Terapagos as just a natural counter with the normal typing. And we saw a ton of Shadow Rider Calyrex and Terapagos matches on stream. But it was so funny because the Shadow Rider Calyrex won most of the time, despite the fact that we saw Terapagos with Calm Mind set up. The rest of the pieces surrounding the Shadow Rider Calyrex were so strong, like Urshifu, I think we saw Mienshao, that Terapagos just doesn't stand a chance in those types of matchups.
Yeah, and I think what was really interesting, especially in Italy, was there were 69 players, I believe, that made it into the day 2 of the event. And Calyrex Ice Rider, I think that's a pretty standard, like everyone knew how good it was, but it actually did not have a great showcasing in Italy. It actually only was 9 out of the 69 teams that actually used Calyrex Ice Rider. So that was a pretty big dramatic drop. So it was actually interesting to see whether Calyrex Ice Rider would be able to still perform well upcoming to the North American International Championship.
The highest placing Ice Rider Calyrex at Bologna was 26th. Which is kind of interesting to think about, that Lunala placed higher than it did.
Yeah, and if you look, a lot of the top 16 slots were actually covered by Calyrex Shadow Rider too, especially.
Well, it's so wild to look at. And of course, like that usage did carry over. But, you know, it's so funny that we talk about Ice Rider Calyrex now, because It was always very consistent, but I think a lot of people had disrespected it because there were so many other Pokemon that were just considered stronger. Like the fact that Miraidon out of the gates ended up winning the first Regulation G event in North America, everyone's like, oh, okay, well, now we have to have a Miraidon answer. And so you look at the evolution of the rotating wheel, I guess, as a couple players look at it. But then you have, well, Kyogre never really made an appearance, but it was always Shadow Rider Calyrex, Miraidon. Maybe Koraidon finally has a chance to shine. Oh, Zamazenta won an event. And Ice Rider Calyrex was just kind of always there. Major credit to Justin Burns, by the way, who is a player that was able to play one of the best Ice Rider Calyrex players in the world, just based on his history with restricted formats in Sword and Shield, but then also was able to get top 16, top 8, and top 4 at all of the Regulation G events that he played at. I think that's crazy good.
Yeah, he's definitely been one of the most impressive ones. He was also another player I was very worried that could actually theoretically win the event of North America Internationals and actually surpass. So those were the two players. But yeah, he's been super consistent with Ice Rider. I know he's been super dedicated to the archetype, and I think he is one of the best players with the team archetype. He just knows how to really pilot into really great positions. He's always been a really strong balance player, and I feel like the tools that Calyrex Ice Rider does usually appreciate is balance related, Incineroar, Moongus, and a few others. So he's able to really take advantage of those extremely well and position it correctly.
Oh, for sure. I think what's so cool is like seeing Ice Rider not only win, but seeing the just sheer number of different Pokemon in the top 8 cut of NAIC is actually crazy. Like you have 2 Ice Rider Calyrex, you have 2 Terapagos, you have 2 Kyogre, as well as a Shadow Rider Calyrex and a Miraidon. And then you take a look at the rest of the supporting pieces. And I don't know if I had Overquill or Wo-Chien ever making a top cut in a Scarlet and Violet event. Ever. And we got both of those, plus Ditto and Iron Jugulis and Screamtail. And just so many unique picks. What did you think of this top cut when you saw it?
Yeah, no, it was super exciting watching these. And I think restricted formats, especially, like, you already know how to like face against balance. You know like a lot of what the archetypes of like what a restricted exactly wants in the pairing. So having these little texts to really counteract those specific matchups to what your restricted is weak against or take advantage of what your restricted is strong with is a huge part about like playing restricted format and team building towards that. And it's actually pretty funny. Like a lot of these like concepts, like a Screamtail Terapagos, like even before the Italy event, I knew some people who were building with that core. The Kyogre team with Wo-Chien, I thought with Grimmstar was pretty brilliant because, first of all, because Calyrex Shadow is popping up, 4 dark types on the team. 4 dark types. That's absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. But the fact is, we saw the gang of Shiliang Tang, Justin Tang, I think also for this event, Chepa Cross and Andrew Ding also ran the exact same 6 and for this event, but Shiliang Tang, Justin Tang ended up working on that team before, and I thought like this patched up a lot of like what the strong suits of I think this version could be compared to their other version that they were able to get top 8 at the first regional championship, which was Indianapolis at that point.
Yeah.
So we saw like before they had Serena instead of the Wo-Chien that was able to take advantage of like a Tailwind, and it really did seem more geared towards Tailwind instead. But I actually really like this change where they ended up having a Wo-Chien and going with Grimmsnarl screens instead. They still have the option to go for a Tailwind, but it's not exactly, I think, a super crucial element to the team anymore, and more rely on the Assault Vest Kyogre, which I felt like was a pretty good call just going into the event with screens and the Wo-Chien with Pollen Puff. The Ruination that they had tech-wise into like a Water Spout, it was really cool with Pollen Puff synergy. I thought was like pretty brilliant. It's like Assault Vest Kyogre is really good in taking hits from Miraidon after you Terra Grass it because it's really hard to break through. An Assault Vest Kyogre that has a base 140 special defense stat plus the light screen from Grimmsnarl makes it an extremely good wall. Well, just a sponge, first of all, and then is able to do a lot of damage because base 150 special attack in rain. So you have a lot of ways for Kyogre just to be able to take the attacks from like Miraidon, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, Astral Barrage is not doing too much damage. Draining Kiss is like not doing any damage, even after a nasty plot. The Terapagos, like all of these Pokemon don't exactly like dealing with yourself as Kyogre. So I actually thought it was like a really good bring going into this event.
Yeah, I had Kyogre on my predictions. I've been also predicting Kyogre since day one, but has really lived up to its fullest potential at this particular event. And because of the increased usage of the Ice Rider Calyrex 2, you'll love that you're just naturally resistant to those glacial lances without having to terrestrialize or anything like that. And then the 4 dark types, as you said, I think you're covering all of your bases pretty well on this team. But I think what was also really interesting to look at is just how much Grimmsnarl there was. Like even across the board outside of the top 8, we saw a lot of screen setters, either from something like the Grimmsnarl, or you even just had it on, like, I think we saw like a light screen Whimsicott or something crazy. Like there were a couple that would have just even 1 or 2 as an option.
I think screens are always something that lean more towards a restricted format. Like it's just generally strong in a restricted format because you want to try to prevent one of KOs as much as possible. And it's actually really annoying for some archetypes if you don't get that KO. So having tech such as Light Screen Whimsicott, I believe we saw that get second place as well. Light Screen Whimsicott specifically at the Italian special event the weekend before. Grimmsnarl is a Pokemon that's we've seen a lot in Sword and Shield. I think with Dynamax, especially, like screens were super valuable, being able to reduce the damage output, making your Dynamax mon even bulkier. But it hasn't seen too much usage, I think, in this format until now, because just the fact that Grimmsnarl is actually like a decent Pokemon, because Foul Play able to threaten a lot of damage to Calyrex Ice Rider, even if they Terra away from being able to resist or be super effective against it. It still does quite a bit of damage. Professor Calyrex Shadow Rider. Screens just seem pretty useful on like specific archetypes, and some of these Pokemon do have good general bulk. It's just a power dynamic of like how heavy some of these Pokemon can hit. So having the screens is just super valuable. Like even if you're able to stick away for 1 or 2 turns, can be really immense for allowing your restricted to end up firing back damage and pick up KOs. So I think it was no surprise to see Grimmsnarl do pretty well here. It's also got a great typing, very dark is actually like really solid defensively.
Oh, it's so good. And I noticed as well that there is a pretty big decrease in usage of Fluttermane. Like that was something that I thought was a little surprising just based on how much Fluttermane we have seen in series past. And to not really see it crack into sort of the upper ranks of usage was just very interesting. Not to mention the fact that we had Ditto in our top 12 usage of day 2. Did you ever think we would see a world where we would have so many Ditto find so much success? Because like Ditto by itself was always going to be a great Pokemon to have in a single restricted format. You get 2, right? Especially if you're a player that can position it really well, then you have a good chance to use it either to get a second single restricted Pokemon, or you're able to use it to just get some general value out of copying something like an Iron Hands, which we also saw a couple of times on stream. But Justin Burrs was able to get top 8 with a Ditto. We had several other players, 9 others in day number 2 that actually brought the Ditto as well.
Yeah, so we've talked about Ditto, I think, in our last episode, where Ditto is a very high risk, high reward Pokemon, where from team building aspect, it can be very hard because it's not exactly a consistent slot you can really game plan with a ton, because it's really going to depend on the board state and whether you can actually like be able to transform into something you need it to. So that's one big thing. So you're playing with 5 mods and then Ditto as a option, yet it's not as consistently, like you probably have to go on the fly more with Ditto than actually like flowchart anything with it. But I think what's interesting about Ditto, I would not have expected to be in the top 12 usage at all. But I think what's unique about Ditto is, I think in this format where there's a bunch of potential abilities to sweep with like Ice Rider game boost, Calyrex Shadow Rider, especially the nasty plot setups, we saw that it's really able to take advantage of it with the ability to transform into those Pokemon. It's also good into Zamazenta because like we saw in Sword and Shield with Zacian, you're able to get actually the ability activates again. So you copy the boost from the Zacian or the Zamazenta that's boosted, and then the ability activates again. So you end up getting a +2 essentially. So Those body presses really help against opposing Zamazenta, helps against opposing Zacian. Of course, you have against Calyrex Shadow Rider. And if you pair with the Choice Scarf for consistency wise, you always make sure you outspeed your opponent, able to put on the pressure. It's able to do a lot in the right positions. However, if your opponent's really well at positioning themselves or can handle the Ditto, then it's still like a double-edged sword. I think one great example of this was Wolfe versus Judy as Relly in the day one that was streamed, and we saw that even though Judy was able to actually get the Ditto in against the Calyrex Shadow Rider, Wolfe was able to position really well with the wide guard Pelipper that was just able to prevent like you locking into an Astral Barrage. So like even though he was able to transform into the Shadow Rider Calyrex, like he wasn't able to get too much, like either be blocked by the wide guard or go for the boosted Terror Blast, but single target. So it's a really hard mon to actually use consistently, but it does have its niche and is able to, again, I think providing a second restricted can be very, very strong as we see.
Oh, for sure. And Judy actually still ended up getting top 16 at this event. So while it might have been an L on stream, still ended up being a pretty big W overall for the weekend. So that was exciting to watch. But even when you scroll down through even just like the top 8, I think we also see some really interesting picks like the Annihilate. There were a lot of players that were considering Final Gambit Annihilate. I think this one from Alex Underhill is also a choice scarf. So you've got Final Gambit as well as Coaching, Close Combat, Shadow Claw. Shadow Claw is nice because you're pretty fast. So you have that coverage, but just everything else too. Final Gambit's such a great way to be able to open things up by taking out something immediately. A lot of Smear Goal in the meta. I'm not super big fan of that, but like, hey, it's back. At least it doesn't have Dark Void, but it's back.
It also lost Lovely Kiss this generation, or was it last generation? It lost in one of the generations, so it's either has to use Spore or a really inaccurate move like Hypnosis, for better or for worse. So Safety Goggles is more effective against it, but yeah. So we saw quite a few trends, I think, at this event. We saw, for instance, Eric Rios as well as Alex Gomez, who was the defending international championship going to this event, alongside Eduardo Cunha, who ended up placing in the top 4, end up using a Smear Goal. And Smear Goal is just really flexible. Of course, being able to be immune to the Astral Barrages from opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider can be pretty huge. Spore is what Eduardo used. And we saw Transform from Eric Rios and Alex, which I thought like was really cool because if you're able to set up with your Calyrex, you're able to transform into it. You got 2 threats on the field, or you could transform into other restricted Pokemon, kind of like a slower Ditto in a way, but the fact is you have utility outside of just being able to transform into the restricted immediately or into whatever slot you are going to be on that side of the field. So it has way more flexibility in that route. So the fact that is probably one of the better support Pokemon. Focus Sash can make it hard to get rid of. It's able to survive one attack. And it has just so many good moves that it can really use that it's just able to take advantage of it. Screamtail, which you mentioned, we saw Antonio Sanchez do well at the Italian special event, get top 4, was able to get top 8 at this event as well with the same team. And the fact that Encore Disable, I think, is like really cool paired with the Terapagos, because you want to try to have Calm Mind on the Terapagos. We've seen a lot of choice specs on Pokemon like Miraidon, or we've been seeing setup mods like Calyrex Shadow Rider, and the fact that you can threaten those immediately with either Encore Disable, lock them into unfavorable options, this allows the Terapagos to buy turns to set up. So no surprise there that it was able to do well. We saw multiple Grimmsnarls, as you mentioned, getting second place by Aurelian, getting top 8 by Shiliang, and quite a few remaining. And I think one of the interesting teams we should probably talk about, as always, Henry Rich.
Oh my gosh,
Would you like to explain?
Where do we start with this team, James? Because like this one through a spanner, I think, for a lot of people taking a look at it, you have Kyogre and Overquill, with Volcarona, Rillaboom, and then Landorus and Tornadus. So you've got the double genies. Really nice to have the coverage here from the Landorus. You have the speed control from the Tornadus. You also have Taunt, which is super nice. But I'm looking at that Overqwil, and every single time we saw it on stream, James, it was the most underwhelming Pokemon I think I've ever seen. But the theory is there, and I'm so sad we didn't get a chance to see a full showcase of what this Pokemon can do. Because with Swift Swim, it has great natural synergy with the Kyogre. And then it has Gunk Shot, Crunch, Acid Spray, and Protect. So, like, Acid Spray is also nice to be able to pair with your special attackers, but, like, still.
I think it's funny because when I was in Los Angeles, Henry was also there. He was competing as well. We ended up talking for a bit, and I don't think he used this at LA, if I'm not mistaken.
Didn't.
But
he had Lunala.
Yeah, so he and I were talking, and we were talking about Kyogre, and then he was telling me about this Overqwil strategy, and I'm like, that sounds like pretty fun stuff. I'd use the effective vows, and then he'd be like, oh, I'll definitely send you like a paste or something, and I'm like, bet. And then I find out he brings the actual Overqwil to this event. It actually does perform well. So he was telling me a bit about it from LA. It actually funny because the stream showcasing contradicted him a bit because he talked about how Terra Poison Life Orb Overqwil with Gunk Shot could hit Oko like a Raging Bull from full, which we saw on stream. Eduardo Cunha is maybe a bit more defensive oriented, did actually survive the Terra Poison Gunk Shot, which if you got that knockout, it was an incredible position for you. But since he didn't, it went pretty downhill pretty fast. But I do like the concept of it because it's not like a water type, so it shares weaknesses with Kyogre. It's able to do pretty well against Rillaboom. It's a little bit inconsistent because of Gunk Shot, unfortunately, but the power that it provides is absolutely incredible. Can punish like Terragrass Almazentas and a bunch of other things. The fact that the dark and the poison coverage helps against the Calyrex Shadow Riders because most of them are Terra Fairies, so you're able to threaten the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and because of Swift Swim, you outspeed it in its non-terrassalized form, and then if it does terrassalize, normally it is fairy. You punish with Gunk Shot. Acid Spray Water Spout can be an incredible wall breaker depending on the situation. So I thought this was a really interesting, unique way of running Tornogre. He also had some really unique techs, I would say. The Terraghost on Kyogre to avoid fake outs. The main thing was probably like a Volcarona, this one running Bug Buzz, no fire move because of the rain. Mainly, I'm assuming this is just for like Ice Riders and maybe a few other specific matches, which I felt like was unique. And Landorus Incarnate. Normally, we see a Life Orb on that Pokemon, but because Overqwil is running it, this one decided to opt for a Choice Scarf to help out, I guess, against the Miraidon matchup. Because if you're playing against Tail and Miraidon, you have your Landorus that can outspeed. You have Terra Ground, Anti-Storm, guaranteed to hit in rain. Just able to punish those. So I thought it was like a really unique tech because you can actually play offensive against those kinds of cores. So really unique stuff. And congrats to Henry because he performed exceptionally well at this event with a really unique team intake.
Oh, yeah. No, I was so impressed. And, like, again, really bummed that the Overqwil didn't get a chance to showcase its strengths on stream. Things made of paper when you look at special defenses, by the way. It's like 65 special defense, which is underwhelming when you get one shot by a lot of things on stream that, unfortunately, you're not tech to survive. But with that placement, I want to say that Henry Rich ended up doing like quite well, actually top 12 of Oceania. I don't know what the travel awards and travel stipends look like over there, but still really great season for him.
Yeah, it's funny because he said this was his off season. He actually hasn't been competing, so I think he actually got his world invite off this, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure
so
did.
Congrats to Henry once again. But yeah, then there are like other techs. We see more Dittos. We see an interesting one with Talonflame. This one running Life Orb Will-O-Wisp that got 9th place by Zeke Ostiola. And yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. The fact that over Women's God, you have Talonflame and Life Orb with only Brave Bird is definitely something, but the Life Orb is kind of needed in order to actually dish out KOs with the Sword of Ruin on Xianpao, so it can pick up some surprise knockouts. And then also the Twin Beam of Farigiraf to help out against the fighting type Focus Sash users such as Mienshao and the Water Ushers that run it, as well as Calm Mind, no ground move on the Blood Moon Ursaluna to punish specifically. You don't need Earth Power with Ursaluna. You're usually clicking the the normal type moves most of the time. So you can actually punish, like, if they try to protect stall out Trick Room or Tailwind, you're able to punish with Calm Mind. So that was the idea behind it. So I thought that was a pretty interesting tech overall. We have to, I think, mention the team that Audie and Alex Underhill used to Alex Underhill placing the top 16. Audie, I do not remember what he placed. I think he finished top 64.
He was 60th.
Yeah, so would you like to introduce the Pokemon we're going to be talking about?
Oh my god. Okay, so I did mention one of them. So it was the Annihilate, but like check out the rest of the team, okay? Because it's Annihilate and Calyrex Ice Rider. You got Smeargle and Farigiraf and the Ursaluna Blood Moon. And then you have Electabuzz. And Electabuzz has Follow Me, Faint, Taunt, and Volt Switch with Vital Spirit and Eviolite. And like what's so interesting about the Electabuzz is when people first looked at it, they're like, oh yeah, Follow Me. That's a new move that it gets in this generation. So you can do that and just have the opportunity to potentially even paralyze something. Vital Spirit is not the ability to let you do that, but the theory is there. The Faint is so nice because you're able to break the protects, and then you also have the Taunt, which has just been such a great tech move. But you have the Farigiraf with Terra Ground, Mental Herb, with Psychic Noise and Terra Ground, Terra Blast with Helping Hand, and then the Calyrex Ice has the Fire Terra. Smeargle has Decorate. That's a new one for a couple of Smeargles. But then you also have the Final Gambit, Choice Scarf, Annihilate, and then the Ursaluna Blood Moon. That's wild, though. It was the Electabuzz that absolutely killed me. The Electabuzz Vital Spirit.
So this is a kind of similar team we've seen concept-wise of Decorate plus like Trick Room stuff before, especially in the Japan meta. They use it this generation, and it's definitely a unique one. So our Trick Room, the Choice Scarf Annihilate, not too surprising, usually runs a max HP, max speed variant to outspeed things, get the Final Gambit off. The reason you run Shadow Claw over Rage Fist is because generally you don't get into a position where you can go for Rage Fist. Also, Shadow Claw guarantee KOs on non-bulky Calyrex Shadow Riders, which can be a pretty big thing. It's actually pretty significant, like the fact that you need to Shadow Claw. Even with no attack investment, you do get the KO. Close combat for the fighting move. Coaching, which you can set up with the Calyrex Ice Rider. Final Gambit, of course, as a sacrifice. Usually you want it to get to a 3v3 just so, like, hopefully your 3 is able to beat your opponent's 3, get rid of a vital piece on your opponent's board. And yeah, we have the Smeargle, pretty standard to set up. Fake Out, Spore, Follow Me. This one running Decorate, and this one's pretty slow. It actually underspeeds, I believe, everything on the team, if I'm not mistaken. We saw on stream, and is able to go for a self-decorate onto your partner. So hopefully they could sweep by the time the Trick Room turns are gone, because that's really the nature of the game, is just trying to sweep with a +2 Pokemon, or +4 if you can get more decorates off. But yeah, you're able to really stack the boost and hopefully sweep under the Trick Room. Electabuzz, I think, is really cool because Vital Spirit, of course, prevents you from being able to go to sleep, so it's actually really nice against Moongus. You also have Taunt as a way to shut down a Moongus from sporing the others in case you want to reposition. Faint is really nice because Wide Guard is something you really want to punish or make sure that's on the board when you want to click Glacial Lance or Hyper Voice for some really strong attacks. Follow Me to redirection for the partners. And Volt Switch, I think, is a really smart repositional tool because you're able to get into like the Blood Moon or the Calyrex Ice Rider safer. If you have like Farigiraf plus like Electabuzz or Farigiraf plus Smeargle, you kind of want to reposition generally, because if you get into those board states, it just ends up you get stalled out with the trigger turns. Even if you decorate this Farigiraf, this one's a bulky Farigiraf, so it's not able to actually do as much damage and sweep over time. So be able to stall out Trick Room turns and get rid of the board, and then like after Trick Room's over, hopefully you can finish off the slow Calyrex Ice Rider and Blood Moon Ursaluna, which we saw did happen on stream. I believe Aurelian was able to pot it really well against Audie that way. So having that Volt Switch tech with your Follow Me Mon is actually really cool for like repositioning that way. So yeah, just a really unique team. Just really set up on the decorate, get the sweeps in. it did perform extremely well. So kudos to that amazing team that they created.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch, and I think something that a lot of people were excited to see on stream. But I think like the final and maybe more important thing to talk about here is Patrick Connors, the winner of North America International Championships this year. What a guy. Honestly, I think that this finals maybe not could have not gone better. You have Aurelian Sula, who is one of the top European players. They have been such a star ever since they started in the Masters division last year. And I think like almost day twoing every single event for sure, like in the last 2 years, but also multiple top 32s, top 16s, top cuts, got second at NAIC after getting second twice this year and then 2 other times last year, still has yet to win a major title in a Masters division event, but still like showing up and being like so powerful. But Patrick Connors, Florida man, able to trump everything else. And it was so wholesome, not just to see his win when he wasn't expecting to get this far, but also his family drove up from Florida to watch him compete in this finals. And they got a chance to watch him win. And it was just like the cutest thing. I started crying when I saw them over there. They were just like cheering him on.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an amazing finals. Like it was actually like really good games throughout like both competitors. It actually went to a game 3 series. I thought it was pretty exciting. Like one mistake costed the players the games basically. And yeah, it was definitely a incredible one. Of course, heartwarming for Patrick. Hey, congrats to him. I believe his best major finish before that was top 64 at Orlando both years prior. And that was it. He does not travel. And like I know he's actually been hyped up even before this event by his local players in Florida. And I think kind of shows to you, like we've seen the story of Tim Edwards at EUIC, Patrick Connors taking this one at NIC. Those local scenes, like go to your local scenes if you don't, because you'd be surprised of how much you can improve quickly enough. And I think Patrick Connors is definitely a strong suit there. And yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. Of course, Aurelian, I think either way this story went, like it was going to be a happy ending regardless. It would have been great to see Aurelian actually take his first one because, man, I think he definitely is one of the best players who hasn't actually won a big major yet. So would have been really cool to see. Last year, he was 1 win away from top cutting the world championship. He lost his winning in, but I would love to see him hopefully this year be able to make a really strong statement at Worlds. He's been doing a killer like last 2 seasons though in Scarlet Violet, so would be really happy to see that there. But yeah, I thought the games were really impressive overall. The fact that Patrick was able to win with basically your standard Calyrex Ice Rider team that was pretty dominant even at the start of the format and not really like too many changes. Like I think the only really like big change really is the Urshifu actually running Water Terra on this compared to Ghost, which was picked up, and then Calyrex Ice Rider running a Water Terra, which goes to show you on like on balance you can get away with a few different things according to like your preferences. But overall, like it was pretty much just your standard Calyrex Ice Rider build. So it requires a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge of how to position with balanced Calyrex Ice Rider. And he played phenomenally. And it looked like he was pretty confident. He locked in pretty quickly with his moves against Aurelian in most of the cases on stream. Thought it was fantastic how he played. And Aurelian also really impressed me, I think, throughout this stream. Like I watched a lot of Aurelian sets throughout the weekend, and not like there were so many positions where he was able to like sneak away a game, for instance, with like a Terra that wasn't Terapagos. Like he was able to get into a really strong lead just because he terraed something else. And Terapagos, normally you would want to Terra the Terapagos because that's what you want to do, get the spread, Terra Starstorm. But he was able to find positions where if he was able to get this gamble right and position it to where he was able to get a knockout or convert something huge off that Terra, and he didn't even need it. So it was really impressive to see there.
The biggest example to me was in the finals when he ended up going Terra Ghost on the Grimmsnarl just to get around a single fake out, and it worked. The gamble paid off, and Aurelian was up so far after that play went through. So yeah, like definitely super well played by them. I was really impressed by the level of play we also saw in seniors. Joshua Robinson is a player that I had followed ever since LAIC this previous year. he ended up getting second place in the seniors division at LAIC. And to see him finally get the big win now is really exciting. I don't know if it's his final year. He might have one more. But even for a player like Kevin Hahn in the juniors division, it was Kevin's final season in juniors. And so now he's going to be aging up into seniors and also kind of able to finish off with a big win at NAIC. So exciting stuff to see these players like get a chance to move forward at some point, and they're coming after our spots and in Masters in a couple of years. But James, I think it was a good event overall, and it gets me really hyped for Worlds.
Worlds is definitely going to be exciting because the archetypes just keep getting improvised, and yeah, like I think the thing is we're kind of getting towards a point where I think a lot of the players know what's good. Like we've seen these archetypes before, like the Maridon team that did well. We've seen Whimsicott, Rigraft. Chiyu was kind of a later addition. Iron Hands picked up a bit later, so not too surprised to see it get top 4 with that build. The Calyrex Shadow Rider builds have been improving. The Ice Rider builds have been having some minor techs. Justin Burns, for instance, running with the Ditto. Patrick Connors, for his preferences, running different Terra options than we commonly see on that archetype, but not too off the mark there. And I think it's just like having a team that you know your ins and outs of, having a few maybe techs as well. Like we saw Henry Rich go really at it with some of the tech options. The Wochien version is a whole different way of playing Kyogre with the Grimmsnarl. Screamtail changed to Terapagos, like Calm Mind setup, mind game. The Grimmsnarl on Aurelion side really allowed a good mixture of both offensive and defensive options on the offensive Chiyu, Flutter Mane, Terapagos core. So we'll see what can be paired up for the World Championship because we have over 2 months until Honolulu. So this is just going to be a really interesting time. Players are going to have a lot more time to build in the last World Championship. We have an actual meta. We have tournament results to go off of, but really in between, it's just, are there going to be online grinders or are there going to be like those who are going to be secret to their team building groups? So it's going to be really interesting to see like what players come up with for the World Championship and how they're prepping.
Especially when you add Japan into the mix. Oh my goodness. Japan players can cook. And they're also so good at the game. So I feel like that adds an even tougher layer of difficulty to the World Championships, knowing that not only have we had meta development, but they now have a lot of time on their hands to practice with this format. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Have a couple of months to fill before we get to that point.
Yep. And oh man, we couldn't even cover, like, if we tried to cover Japan Nats, I think it would be like way too long of a video.
Plus, let's close team sheet. Like we'll get to that later, I think. Maybe if you guys comment enough that we'll do a Japan Nats coverage video.
Yeah, it's actually funny because I don't even think normally I think we saw Japan Nats really influence the North American internet's metagame, and I don't think it really did too much this time around. We did see Terapagos win the event, but it was a completely different version. I think Terapagos Iron Hand started picking up a bit more, but otherwise that one was a rock polished meteor beams that won the Japan Nets. So nobody that picked up in the West, unfortunately, but definitely different formats. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with for what we play, the best of 3 open tier sheet era and other nationals that are going on in the East side right now. So will be interesting to see what everyone builds.
Well, I think that's going to be it from James and I for this NAIC recap. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, you like the video, you follow the channels, and you stay tuned for all the extra and future content coming out from the Beastcoast Pokemon channel. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys next time.